My name is Yawei Liu. I direct the China program at the Carter Center. And the China program at the Carter Center is one of the 6 programs under the peace umbrella. At the current, we focus more on promoting better relationship between the United States and China. Well, I taught a Chinese foreign policy class last semester at Emory. My primary interest, because I wrote my dissertation at Emory University, was the focus on perception of these decision makers. So I wrote my dissertation on Chairman Mao's perception of the United States from the time when he became aware of the United States to the time that he passed away in 1976. I think the changes in the perception of Mao had a huge impact on his view of the United States, but more so on the decisions that he made toward the United States. So that continues to be my primary interest, is how Americans, particularly American decision makers and the elite, see China, and how the Chinese leaders and their advisors and decision makers see the United States. Well, in the long term, I'm optimistic about this most consequential bilateral relationship in the world, because the economy is interconnected, because there are so many Chinese that are studying here, that are working here, and there will be more Chinese students, Chinese businesses that will come to the United States. And investment both ways are also rising. And so the interconnectedness of the two countries in the long term will prevent outbreak of conflict between the two countries. But in the short term, as you probably saw this morning in the news, that the United States just deployed a carrier group in the South China Sea. U.S. is going through a presidential election cycle, and China is going to have leadership change in the upcoming year. And China's economy is also slowing down drastically, and domestic policies are upsetting a lot of people in China. So in the short term, I'm a little pessimistic in terms of where this relationship is going to go. Hopefully, the leaders in both capitals, in Beijing and in Washington, will have the vision to see that this relationship, to use a cliche that was and continues to be used by many here, is this relationship is too big to fail. It has been the anchor of peace and prosperity in Pacific Asia, East Asia area. I hope they're going to see this and they will make every possible effort to prevent this relationship from sliding into uncertainty and into possible conflict. Two things about this relationship. I guess number one, I would say look back at the history of U.S.-China relations. From the very beginning, when Americans sent a ship to China to start trading, and then tracing that relationship from the very beginning through the years, the so-called century of humiliation, to World War I, World War II, and particularly to the 30 years between 1949 and 1947, when the two countries had no relationship. And then look back at the last 36 years, when the U.S. and China had a vibrant relationship. So that's number one, to have a historical perspective, to see the highs and the lows of China, and how the fate of China is connected to the status of the bilateral relationship between these two countries. So that's number one. I think number two is people matter. For Emory students, who are here, they're all bridges. They are ears and eyes for their parents, for their friends, for their relatives in China, and for the Chinese population. So they need to let Chinese people know that Americans are friendly toward China. At the same time, they need to let Americans know that there are differences both culturally, economically, and huge difference in terms of how the two countries are governed. But essentially, these are the two most important countries in the world. Everyone has this responsibility to make this relationship a productive one, a constructive one, and a one that will contribute not only to the benefit of the two countries, but also to the people in the whole world. You mean as a student, or
as a professor?
As a professor.
Uh-huh.
Well, back in 1989, I was applying to a graduate school where I was going to pursue a doctoral degree. I have never heard of Emory. I already spent 2 years, in Honolulu, Hawaii. So my advisor at the time said, why don't you apply for Emory? I said, where is Emory? How about this university? And he told me Emory is in Atlanta. Emory has a lot of money. Maybe you'll be able to get a scholarship so that, you don't have to work while you're pursuing your doctoral degree. So I applied, and fortunately I was able to get Woodruff Fellowship. I think in that particular year, 1989, I was one of 12 graduate students that got that fellowship. So what I like about Emory is, it's a competitive selection of either undergrad or graduate students based on the merit of the candidates. And I was able to get the fellowship. I was able to have so much support that I don't have to worry about raising a family at the same time pursuing a doctoral degree. So I guess that's what I like about Emory. And there's also something I don't like about Emory is this occasional narrow-mindedness for one of the best universities in the United States or in the world not to have a China program. Obviously I'm biased here, but still, for such a good university not to have a China program or major is unfortunate. I hope that's going to change in the coming years. Well, as I said, when I was writing my dissertation, researching U.S.-China relationship, I chose to focus on mutual perception of each other. And the website actually is a continuation of my earlier interest. And I continue to believe the bias or misinformation on both sides are creating hurdles for the relationship to be more harmonious, particularly the asymmetrical misperception of each other is making the current relationship, high maintenance, so to speak. The so-called asymmetry of the relationship is number one, many Chinese, including the top leaders and many of their advisors, believe that the United States cannot tolerate so-called one-party state, cannot tolerate the current political system in China, and Americans are doing everything to delegitimize the Chinese Communist Party, to destabilize China, to seek the eventual collapse of China. So that's a conviction on the part of Chinese leaders and Chinese elite. Now, on the American side, they also have a strong belief that with the growth of the Chinese economy, China is going to increase its military capability, and China will beat up, so to speak, the neighboring countries, and they see South China Sea controversy as well as East China Sea territorial dispute, as the strong example of China's aggressiveness. So this imbalance in the perception of each other is making this relationship very volatile, unstable, and so we're making a small effort, so to speak, to number one, to monitor the misperceptions, and number two, to identify the sources of misperceptions, and number three, which is the most important, is to seek ways to reduce misperceptions so that the relationship could be put on firmer ground and the foundation. Therefore, there will be no confrontation or conflict between the two countries.